So, Bracha Simcha, I think you don't have this book. Let me give you one. Oh, I didn't bring up. Sorry, I have more downstairs. I have to give you another. Yeah, ask Mrs. Yafi.
Which book are we on?
We're book 2.
What is this one?
Okay, so we're doing the Rambam, Maimonides, and we're in Halacha Gimel. And in the booklet, we came to page 9. We finished page 9, where the Rambam writes, and in this part of the Rambam is going into this question: how do we halachically identify Mashiach? So again, we explained last time that unfortunately, one of the reasons why there's so much confusion regarding the subject of Mashiach, because people are making decisions and coming to conclusions based on their feelings, what they think, what feels right, what feels wrong. But the truth is, this subject of Mashiach should be treated no different than any other subject of halacha in Jewish law. So if you want to know the laws of Shabbos, whether something is permissible or not, you look in the Shulchan Aruch to see, is it permissible or not? If you want to know certain foods are permissible or not, you look in the Shulchan Aruch, is this food permissible or not? If I want to know laws about Mashiach, if this person is authentic or not authentic, I look into halacha. How do we define Mashiach? It's not something which depends on how I feel. What does it say in the Torah books? So that's what the Rambam is going to talk about. And this is unique. What we're going to read now, why is it unique? There is no other book of halacha. There's many books of halachas. There's the Shulchan Aruch. And there's the Shulchan Aruch that the Alter Rebbe wrote. There's the Shulchan Aruch that Rabbi Yosef Kara wrote. There's a Shulchan Aruch that was written, it's called the Torah. There are many books of halacha, but all of them talk about all the halachas that are relevant now, not the halachas that are relevant for the times of Mashiach. The one book of halacha that was written that includes all the laws of the third temple and the laws of the sacrifice and the laws of Mashiach is Rambam. That's why we chose this book, to learn the halachas. So the Rambam says, don't think that the way to identify Mashiach is someone will come along and perform miracles. And if they perform big miracles, huge miracles, that's how they will prove they're Mashiach. The Rambam says, no, Mashiach does not have to prove his identity by performing miracles or doing anything else along those lines. So last week, we spoke about why the Rambam says that. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, when he came to the Jews in Egypt, that is the way he identified himself. He performed miracles. Hashem gave him 3 things to do. All were supernatural. And this would help the Jews recognize that he's really the one chosen by Hashem. The other example was we gave a Navi, a prophet. How does a person halachically get the status of a prophet? One thing is clear, he has to be a righteous person, a person who studies Torah, does mitzvahs, doesn't do anything which violates Torah in any way. He has to be extremely, extremely righteous. But how do we know that he's a prophet? And the answer is he has to tell us something about the future and something which normally nobody would know. And then we see if it's fulfilled, and he does this a few times, we know that he is an authentic prophet. So in both cases, things are done that are supernatural to prove that he's authentic. What about Mashiach? The Rambam says Mashiach does not have to do anything supernatural. When he comes, yes, there'll be miracles, there'll be amazing things happening, but that's not the criteria how to define him as Mashiach. What is? So let's turn now to page 10 in the booklet. And here's where he begins to describe, so what is the criteria? How do we define Mashiach halachically? Top of the page. See how everything is so complicated in Torah. When I say number 10, you're looking which numbers. On top it says 232, then it says 233, then it says number 10. So if you see on top of the page, Depends where you, on the bottom it says number 10. The booklet, it's number 10. But the original copy of the Rambam, it's different numbers. Ikar advarim kacha. The main thrust of the matter is as follows. First of all, this is like the preface. The Torah, its statutes, and its laws are everlasting. We may not add to them or subtract to them. First thing is, Torah doesn't change. And Torah doesn't, God forbid, become altered or adjusted. It's truth coming from the God of truth, and it's eternal. What does that have to do with the price of fish? Because the two sort of main religions in the world that claim that they have Mashiach, both of them changed the Torah. I'm talking about Christianity and Islam. Christianity and Islam are both based on Torah. If you speak to anybody in any of these religions who knows the religion, will tell you that they believe that God gave the Jewish people the Torah at Har Sinai, gave them the 10 Commandments. They don't deny that. As much as they are against us and they try to destroy us, they still don't deny the fact that we're the ones who received the Torah from Hashem, and we got our religion from Hashem. But they say that was then. At a certain point in history, Hashem changed his mind. And he said, no more, I'm giving it to a different group, and I'm changing things. That's really what they say. The first time when Hashem gave the Torah, they all admit that the Torah was given at a mountain in front of millions of people. The second time he spoke to one person, and he told the one person, I changed my mind of what I told millions of people, and now the laws have changed. So basically, that alone is the first thing that disqualifies that person to be Mashiach. Mashiach, I will soon see, not only doesn't come to change the Torah, he comes to reinforce the Torah and strengthen the Torah, not to change it. In fact, all the stories within Jews, I mean, Christianity was a leader, was a Jew, but there are more stories about false Mashiachs. All of them did the same thing. They were false people. They presented themselves as Mashiach. Initially, people were fascinated by something about them. And then, before you knew it, they started to change the Torah. And that was the sign that they're false.
Like, did any of them just like the ruse up enough and not try to change the Torah?
Because they were false.
Like, why couldn't they just like be better actors or something?
That's a good question. But I guess Hashem set it up in such a way that if a person would keep up to the Torah, then he's a righteous person. If a person, a false person, he wants to be creative, have his own input, make his own thing, and that's part of the craziness that they present themselves as leaders when they're really not. Yeah.
How can you distinguish between changing the Torah and then like adding like fences? I guess fences are just like trying to protect it further. Like,
good question. Yes, sir, Abigail. Same question. What do you want to ask?
No, I was just gonna ask, like, if it's so false, like, how are so many people believing any other religion? You know what I mean? Like, that sort of disqualifies everything that they believe. I don't know. I'm just wondering, I guess, like, why would Hashem create only a few people who believe this? And like we talked about yesterday, I think Mrs. Nemi's class, I don't remember how, like, we're like the main character or something, and like of the show, but it's just weird to think that there's so much of the population, doesn't believe in the Torah. So,
why Hashem created that way?
Yeah, or how we could just say it's like, I know we say the Torah, but how do we say all of it is false because so many people believe it? If it was really false, why would all those people believe it?
Okay, so let me do one thing at a time. I'll address Shoshana's question first, and then we'll go to your question. Even though your question is a little bit more of a general question about religion, more than Mashiach question. The first question Shoshana's asking, wait a second, what did you just say? Torah never changes? It's full of changes. There's so many laws and so many things we have today that we didn't have before. You know what? Purim didn't exist until 1,000 years after the Torah was given. Hanukkah didn't exist until 1,200 years after the Torah was given. There's so many laws that relate to Shabbos that the rabbis instituted in later generations when they saw that people were weaker and so many things that were adjusted and changed. And then we come along and say the Torah will not tolerate any changes. How does that? So the question is very simple. How do we distinguish between a change which is acceptable, not only acceptable, but is a change that is actually encouraged, and a change that's not acceptable? Remember we spoke about davening. The davening that we have was done by the rabbis in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. All the brachas that we make, this is all later. Yes, they saw a reason why it needs to be, but isn't that change? And this is a question not only regarding other religions, this is a question that's also a question where people who are conservative reform challenge us. Like, you guys made changes, so we're also making changes. What's the big deal? Why are your changes kosher and my changes are not kosher? Where do you draw that line? So the answer is that our changes aren't really changes. And the other changes are really changes. Okay, that sounds like, how do we explain that? What does it mean? Yeah.
I mean, the changes that you make are to like add more stringencies, and the other changes are to like take away stringencies and like let you do things that weren't allowed before. And that's not what our changes.
Even if it would be true, but it still changes. It still changes.
Oh yeah, but it's a difference. As opposed to like nothing else.
That's definitely, generally speaking, true. They're made as fences as people became weaker, but still changes. So let me put it this way. Let me give an example. On Yom Kippur, it's a mitzvah to fast. And it's not just a mitzvah, it's one of the most harshest halachas that a Jew, in fact, we'll find many Jews who are not even so observant in other areas of Judaism, but they will fast on Yom Kippur, because that's something like they grew up with, how could you not fast on Yom Kippur? Person comes to a rabbi and says the doctor told him, because of his condition, that he shouldn't fast. It's dangerous to his health. And the rabbi will say, well, if that's the case, don't fast. In fact, not only you don't have to fast, you're not allowed to fast. You must eat. Is that changing the Torah or not? Why not?
Because the life, like saving a life precedes everything else.
So I'm changing the Torah. I'm changing the halacha.
But there's also the law of the
There you are. Where does this come from, that life and saving life is above everything else? That comes from the Torah. So I'm not changing the Torah. This is part of Torah. What changes is circumstances have changed. And because the circumstances have changed, therefore the application of the halacha is different, because circumstances have changed. So what we're saying is the change, the idea that a rabbi comes along and he institutes a certain halacha, that is has to be based on Torah itself. There has to be a source in Torah that this is okay to do. For example, I'll give an example. An example is, why is the oral Torah called oral Torah? Anybody know?
Because it was passed down orally.
It was passed down orally. It's even more than that. Not only was it passed down orally, we weren't allowed to write it down. It was prohibited to put it in writing, so it was only passed down orally. The written Torah was written and it was passed down as a written document. So when did it happen that the oral Torah is written down? We have all the Gemara and all the commentary on Torah. It's all the oral Torah and it's all written. And the answer is, there was a time in history, a rabbi whose name was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, he wrote the Mishnah, and he was the first person to document and put down the oral Torah in a structured way. And then 200 years later came what we know as Gemara, which is the interpretation to the Mishnah. But how did he do it in the first place? So he brought a source from the Torah itself, that if the time comes that there is any kind of fear or circumstances and threat that Jewish people will start forgetting the Torah that they're studying, then you should write it down. And based on that source, he said, now the time has come. He identified that time, which was a time of exile under the Romans. Now people are forgetting what they've learned because of all that's going on, the difficulties of the exile. And therefore we have to start writing it down, just not everything, just certain points. That's the Mishnah. 200 years later, when they saw that the situation is worse than it used to be, So then they permitted writing down the Gemara and everything else. From that point on, there are no limitations, which means they had to bring a source in Torah. So if it's a source in Torah, then what changed was circumstances, not the Torah. In fact, anything that goes on today, let's say in a conservative shul, they'll say that it's okay to use a microphone on Shabbos. Why? Because how could you expect people to hear? And they're going to go to shul. Maybe years ago, people didn't mind to be in a shul and not hear anything. But today, if you want to encourage people to go to shul, you have to make a microphone. If it is not, they're not going to be enjoying it. They're not going to go to shul. If they don't go to shul, they'll become alienated from Judaism. Or if a Jew lives far away from a shul, they should be able to take a car and go to shul. Now, these are people who are basically religious. They follow Torah, but they're saying, let's make a little bit adjustment according to the times. It looks like it's the same thing, but the question is there a source in Torah that you're allowed to use a microphone on Shabbos? So we know there's a famous answer the Rebbe once gave when someone told him there are rabbis that say you're allowed to use a microphone. And the Rebbe said there are two kinds of rabbis. There are rabbis that know the laws of Shabbos, but they have no clue how a microphone works. And then there are rabbis who know how a microphone works, but they don't have no clue of the laws of Shabbos. So they could say that it's okay. If you know both the laws of Shabbos and how a microphone works, you would know that you're not allowed to use a microphone on Shabbos. Are you allowed to use the microphone so everybody could hear? You have to bring a source in Torah that under those circumstances is permissible. There is no source in Torah. And that's the difference. Reform and conservative, yes, they're saying times have changed. We need to accommodate the new generation. It could lead to intermarriage if we don't. It's all nice thoughts, but there's no source in Torah to make the changes that they made. When a Torah Jew, a Torah rabbi makes a change, like all the laws that we have, they're all based on Torah sources, every single one of them. So in essence, it's not a true change. The Rebbe once gave a very beautiful example of a tree. There's two things about a tree that on the surface are like a paradox, but really only a tree has it. And that is, on one hand, where do you see growth more than anything else? In the plant kingdom, and especially a tree. You put a seed in the ground, this huge things grows with huge branches and hundreds of leaves, and for years, fruits coming every year, and the leaves spread out. There's nothing in the world that has growth like a tree. Okay, so growth is an amazing thing. On the other hand, there's nothing that is so rooted to its original place like a tree. Of an example, we know that in Chassidus, the world is divided into four categories: inanimate, plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom. So there's growth with humans, but not like a tree. There's growth with animals, but not like a tree. And of course, there's no growth with things that are inanimate, like rocks, earth, water. On the other hand, water could be moved from its original place. Animals move around from its original place. A baby's born and moves on. And humans move away from its original place. A tree is stuck in its original place. So on one hand, it's stuck in its original place. On the other hand, it spreads out more than anything else. So the Rebbe said it's an analogy in a way for Torah, that on one hand, it's supposed to spread because we have to apply the Torah to each situation accordingly and each circumstance accordingly, but it has to be based on the roots, which are the original laws of Torah, the principles of Torah. If they're within the guidelines of the Torah principles, it's not a change. So when any change that's made that goes against this is changing the Torah, and that's unacceptable. Now, your question about why the actors didn't act better is a good question, but I guess that's part of Hashem's plan, that when a person is doing something false, ultimately the falseness comes out. Your question is a general question about religion, I think. It's not so much about Mashiach. How come Hashem set up the world in such a way that most of the population, and the truth is like this, most of the world does have 7 mitzvahs. They're supposed to be believing in God, and they're supposed to be observing the mitzvahs that are the moral and ethical laws of Torah, and supposed to have, a justice system and so on and so forth. So it means that Hashem created us, each and every one of us, for a purpose. Non-Jews, they fulfill their purpose by observing the 7 mitzvahs, and we fulfill our purpose by observing the 630 mitzvahs. And by us doing our job and they're doing their job, then it all becomes complete. So the fact that things became distorted and people started to not believe in God. Again, if you look at the beginning of creation, that's what happened. In the story of Bereshit, before you know it, there was already people worshiping idols. And the times of Avraham Avinu, it says he was the only one of the whole world, one single person that believed in God. Everyone else worshipped idols. So I guess that sometimes we find, or maybe we always find, that whatever is sort of stronger in quality is usually less in quantity. But it needs more time and more explanation. So this is the introduction, that anything that comes along and changes the Torah, you know that this is not true Mashiach. And that's what always happened. Like I said, every single one of these false Mashiachs, whether it was from other religions or within the Jewish religion itself, the people that fooled others for a while, but once they realized that they're going against Torah and changing Torah, I think part of the reason why people followed them was because they didn't know what was true, what was not true. Eventually, when they discovered, like with the story with Shabtai Tzvi, he changed Torah. But I'm sure what happened was people said, did you hear he eat food that's not kosher? He desecrates Shabbos. Other people must have said, you're making this up. But when he converted to Islam, everyone knew this was true. And that's when he lost all his following. People realized that even though he said, well, he's Mashiach and there's a deep secret behind it. By the way, that's what he told people. Whenever he changed anything in Torah, he said, he's Mashiach. There's a deep mystical secret behind it. So let's remember, in Judaism, there's nobody that's above Torah. The greatest prophet, the greatest righteous person is governed by the laws of Torah. And if someone comes along and says the Torah doesn't apply to me, that's the first sign that he's false. It's not following Torah. So now the Rambam is going to give four things, which is the criteria. None of them are miracles or anything supernatural, just four things that this is necessary to identify Mashiach. First, Im Yamed Melech Mebeis David, there'll be a king or a leader that rises, and he's from the house of King David. So we saw this in the booklet that we did first. There are many sources that keep referring to Mashiach as a descendant of King David, as a branch of that tree of King David. So this is one of the things which are criteria, which means even if you have a person who's the most righteous person in the world, and he has all the qualities in the world, if he's not a descendant from the family of King David, then that alone is enough of a reason that can be Mashiach.
And do we have this track?
So this is the question which I expected. How could you know today who comes from King David, who lived over 2,000 years ago? What? What do you want to say?
I met a family that they knew their like lineage, which is
Lineage.
but I feel like most people probably don't.
So the answer is like this. There are a number of great Torah sages, like Rambam himself, Maimonides, Rashi, you all know who Rashi is in the Chumash, and others, that they testify about their own lineage and genealogy, that they are descendants of the house of King David. So some of them lived 1,000 years ago, some of them lived 500 years ago, 800 years ago, 400 years ago, that's so far back. So if a person knows that they're a descendant from a family who lived 400 years ago, which is not so hard to know, then if automatically you already know that this person is from the house of King David.
It doesn't have to be like a patrilineal descent.
No,
It doesn't.
some things, yes, but not this.
Not this.
Right, it has to be from the house, means from the family of King David. So actually, I brought this to show you. I don't think anyone needs the list. If anyone wants a copy, I can give it to you. But this is someone that wrote a book on one of the rabbis who's called Maharal of Prague. Maharal of Prague is a rabbi who lived about 400 years ago. He was probably the greatest rabbi in his, what?
He made the goal.
He made the golem, right? If you know about the golem, he created a golem, and he's the one who stopped. Golem is, he created a human being with the power of Kabbalah, that through this person, he was able to stop the blood libels. In those days, there were a lot of blood libels, and he lived in Prague, and he was able to stop the blood libels. He did something with it. There's fascinating stories about how this happened, But
There's a really good book on it.
what?
There's a really good book on it. That's like
It's actually called the Geula. That's one of the names of the book.
Prague.
Yeah,
It's really
The
good.
Geula,
of
Oh,
Prague.
Golden Prague.
Yeah,
Prague.
Prague.
It's really good.
So I'm just showing you this person who wrote about this subject made a list, and he went down name by name, father, all the people who were descend back to King David, all the way back to Adam Arishan, the first man. So basically, from Adam Arishan till King David is in the Chumash, and then you have it in the prophets because you see who's father and who's the son. Then there is more in the books of the prophets from King David till later. And then there are other books, and putting it all together, he did all that research. Some things are written in one book, some are in another book. He put it all together, and he shows how the Maral of Prague was a descendant of King David. And he lived 400 years ago. So anyone today that knows that they're a descendant of Maral of Prague knows that they're a descendant of King David. Yeah.
Does it say anywhere that Mashiach has to be a boy?
Amen?
Yeah.
Yep. It's in the Rambam. And the basis for that is because Mashiach has all the same laws as a king. The first class, when we spoke about this, we said these laws are in the laws of kings, which means Mashiach is a specific kind of king, but he has the same laws, rules, and restrictions and criteria of any king. And in Judaism, a king can only be a man. A woman is a queen, but a king is a man, basically, because it says in the Chumash, masculine when it comes to a king. So if a king can only be a man, and Mashiach is a king, so Mashiach is only a man. So that's the first thing, that he has to be a descendant of King David. The second thing, Hoige b'Torah, in the English, he's learned in Torah and observant of the mitzvahs as prescribed by the written law and the oral law, like David, his ancestor, was. Which means basically that he's a tzaddik, just like King David was a righteous person who excelled in Torah study, excelled in the observance of mitzvahs, believed in the written Torah and the oral Torah. Remember, we said there were groups of people that they claim, we only believe in the written Torah, we don't believe in the oral Torah. In fact, in the times of Maimonides, Rambam, who lived about 800 years ago, there was a very strong movement. They were called Karaites, and they were very strong in terms of denying the written Torah and following only the oral. The other way around, denying the oral Torah, following only the written Torah. So the Rambam says the second criteria has to be a tzaddik. In other words, no matter what sign he shows, if he's not known as a tzaddik, as a righteous person is not somebody who studies Torah. All Jews who are religious will study Torah, do mitzvahs. He has to be excel. He has to be beyond the average, beyond the norm in righteousness, both in Torah study and observance of mitzvahs. The third thing is, Yaakov Kol Yisrael, let me do the English, he will compel all of Israel to walk in the ways of the Torah and reinforce the breaches in its observance. That's the third thing, which means he will engage in a process of bringing Jews around the world to observe Torah and observe mitzvahs. And those who are already observing, he will encourage them to observe the Torah and the mitzvahs in a more complete way and to reinforce the breaches in their observance, things that are missing, that are lacking, that are not good enough, and help them do it in a better way. So if we see someone who is a descendant of King David, he's a tzaddik in observance of Torah and mitzvahs, and he engages in bringing Jews from globally, we're talking about Kol Yisrael, all the Jews, to Torah and mitzvahs. And the fourth thing is, Yilcham L'chemes Hashem, he will fight the wars of God. What does fight the wars of God mean? There are two interpretations. Yes.
Sorry. So if this is accepted by like all like the observant groups of Judaism, so like point number 3, why was it so controversial then when like Chabad was trying to like spread Judaism to everyone, like the simple man and woman, like when that was something that Mashiach, like in the times, like someone would be doing. Like,
I mean, why are there people that are against spreading Yiddishkeit in general?
yeah, to people who aren't necessarily like observant.
The reason why people were against was because they thought And even though today there's so many people that do outreach, not only Chabad, there's still plenty of Jews, religious Jews that don't get involved anywhere. And they feel, number one, that I have to spend my time studying Torah and doing mitzvahs myself. And the second reason is they feel, well, if you're going out there to people who are not religious and don't believe in God, isn't that risky for you? Maybe you'll end up not believing in God if you have a conversation with that guy on college campus. And also, I think before the Rebbe engaged in this project, I think most people didn't even believe that it's possible to walk over to someone who's not religious and talk to them about religion. Why in the world would they even listen to me? This person grew up without Yiddishkeit, knows nothing about it, having a free life. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, and I'm coming to tell them to do things in a restricted way. But the Rebbe basically looked at the neshama and said not only that people will be accepting, but people deep down, they're waiting for you to approach them. And this is what we see, how thousands of people have changed their lives. One of the rabbis here in Crown Heights once told a story that he was meeting with a very big rabbi, a leader of another community, a Hasidic community, and this question came up. So that rabbi said to him, it's not our way. And he said, I'll give you an analogy. The other rabbi said, he said, imagine there's a fire and there's furniture in the house that the fire already destroyed part of it. And there's furniture that the fire didn't destroy anything. It's still totally intact. Which would you say if you have a little bit of time left? The furniture that's been burnt or the furniture that's still intact? So he said the furniture that's still intact. So he said, well, there's a fire burning out there, a fire of assimilation, a fire of people who don't believe in religion and Hashem. So our opinion is that we have to do everything to save our own children, that sort of the fire didn't get to them, rather than going out to where the fire got to. So the Chabad Chassid said, I don't know where it came to me, but I answered him. An answer came to me. And I said, it's a beautiful analogy if you're talking about furniture. What about its people? There are people in the building that the fire didn't touch them, they're perfectly okay. And there are people that were injured by the fire. Who would you run to save? The one that were injured by the fire or the people that can handle themselves? And of course, his answer was, yeah, the people who are injured by the fire, they would come first because they can't take care of themselves. So basically, it's a different outlook. So even though the rest are, and they might believe, okay, when Mashiach comes, he'll do it. But it's not for us. We're not qualified to get involved in such kind of work. That's how a lot of people felt. What is the last thing with fighting the wars of Hashem? Fighting the wars of Hashem has two meanings. One is in a very physical way, one is a spiritual way. Physical means simply like we find with King David. There were wars with other nations and other countries. They attacked Jews. And the king of Israel was the one who had an army to fight back and to protect the Jewish people. The other interpretation is that in every generation, besides the fact that we had to deal with wars of other nations that tried to destroy us, like in the times of Hanukkah and the times of Purim, in fact, in every generation, there was another kind of war that had to be fought, which is more of a spiritual war, a war of like the movement I just spoke about that believed in the written Torah, but not in the oral Torah. People that came up with ideas that were contrary to Torah and tried to influence Jews not to do that. Or like the Enlightenment movement, the Reform movement, these are movements within Judaism that are discouraging Jews from observing Judaism, like the Jewish communists in Russia. Very powerful movement. They were called the Yevsekta, the Jewish communists, and they were out to uproot Yiddishkeit. So it was a spiritual war, not just a physical war, not a war that you're fighting with weapons. So this could be both, because this was really the responsibility of a king, of a leader, that he has to make sure that the Jewish people are protected physically. He has to make sure that the Jewish people are protected spiritually. If a person has these four things, you can assume that this person is Mashiach. It's not the end of the story, because it doesn't yet mean that it'll actually happen. It means that this person could be that person that is meant to be Mashiach. But what? there's a possibility that, yes, he has all the criteria and has all these qualities, but at the end of the day, it might not come to fruition. If there's another three things that he does, then we know for sure that this is it, and there's no sort of, it's irreversible. At this point, things still are reversible. What are the other three things? I'll say it briefly, but we'll elaborate on it more the next time we give this class. And it says like this: if he succeeded in all the above, which means he brought all this, for example, it says he will engage in bringing Jews back to Judaism. If it comes to a point where he succeeded with this all the way, not just engaged, he actually succeeded all the way. He succeeded in building the third Beis Hamikdash. He succeeded in bringing all the Jews together to Eretz Yisrael. Then we know that he is Mashiach in a way which is certain, which means that it's irreversible. At that point, we know that this is it and we're going to the end. It's not something that can be changed because we don't deserve and we're not worthy. But if these things didn't happen yet, just the first part, it's still something which is reversible. So we're going to elaborate on this and explain this next time. And we'll get there. Yeah.
What were the three things? So building the third Beis Hamikdash, bringing all the Jews to Israel.
The first thing is that all the things mentioned above, he succeeded. Let's say the wars of Hashem, he wasn't defeated. He's the one who defeated the enemies. In bringing Yidden to Yiddishkeit, he didn't fail in this project. He succeeded in this project. Yeah. Okay. To be continued.
Thank you.
You're welcome.